Whether we know him as a doctor, or reverend, or pastor, or simply Don, it's an honor for all of us to be here today to note the 40th anniversary of Donald Green as a minister of the Lutheran Church, and especially to note that for more than half of that ministry, he has been a leading light in the area of interfaith, interreligious relationships, especially in his role with all of us who are part of Christian Associates. And so, dear Don, I need to say that together with all of the leaders of the various congregations in Southwestern Pennsylvania, we are so touched by your invitation that we be with you here today. And you can be guaranteed that during this important service, all of us are raising up our prayers of thanks to God for the likes of yourself. God bless you for sure. Well, this being Lent, I must admit I have a confession to make. I usually try to avoid talking about this publicly, but there are times when you simply can't escape it. You have to own up to it. And I believe that this is one of those times. And to be perfectly honest with you, I know that I also have to speak in the name of our dear brother Don, as well as a few other people in the congregation whom I know would have to make the same confession. Here it is. We are baby boomers. Yes, I'm part of that generational bulge between 1946 and 1964 after World War II that so many of you younger folks have to put up with as we celebrate one anniversary after another from our formative years. And often, and rightly so, you could care less. But there are so many of us that you have to relive nostalgia with us, whether you want to or not, over and over again. For example, take this past February 9th. On that day, we baby boomers, and all the rest of you, remember the 50th anniversary of when the Beatles first appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. 70 million people watched the Ed Sullivan Show that night, and by those standards, that was absolutely astronomical. There's not a baby boomer around before 1955 that didn't watch them. And I can tell you I did. You can see it all today if you weren't around in 1964. You can see it on YouTube. When the Beatles were introduced, the first song they sang was All My Lovin', with the line, all my lovin' I will send to you. And then they nearly drove the audience crazy in total hysterics when they sang She Loves You. That song had the immortal lyrics, She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I know it's hard to convey what the Beatles meant to the baby boomers, and I'm not here to do that. But I just want to offer caution to you younger folks. Before you think baby boomers are a little silly about all this Beatles stuff, you try to figure out how you will explain Lady Gaga to your grandchildren 50 years from now. The word that permeates so much of the Beatles' music from their earliest songs until their end in 1970 was love. It dominated their music. And that word, probably more than any other, has dominated music for centuries because it is a word that every generation has to figure out. Because love, after all, is at the heart of who we are, what we want to be, and how we want to live. The problem is that we can get some very odd notions of what love is all about. If every generation searches for the true meaning of love, every generation can get a wrong answer. For the baby boomers, it was, she loves you. But other generations have faced a definition of love based in race or class or money or sex or power, with very dangerous and sometimes frightening results to themselves and to society. Every generation has had to face the fundamental question: what does it mean to be human? And defining love is central to that question. That means that love is something every generation has to get right, or their whole lives will go wrong. The key to understanding love is to know that the source of love in our world, the creator of love, is God, and God alone. Love. True love is a gift of God freely given to each and every one of us. And our lives are best lived when we strive to show that love, that divine love, in all that we do, in all that we hope to be, and in all that we are. God is love, St. John tells us. And he who abides in love abides in God, and God in him. When a young teenager girl in Nazareth was minding her own business, which was the business of minding her mom and dad's home, she received an unexpected and startling visitor, an archangel. And after that visit, not only would she not be the same, the world likewise would never and could never be the same. As you and I have heard that stirring story of what happened in that little house in Nazareth so many years ago, we can so clearly identify with that young maiden, the fear that she faced, the consolation she received, to know the message came from God, and with him nothing could be impossible. And from there, and through her, the world has come to know, in no uncertain terms, the height and the breadth, the depth and the width of God's love for all of us. So how do we do it? How do we define love in each one of our lives? How do you and I live out God's will, that divine love in our lives? Oh, we all know the golden rule, the summation of the commandments that Jesus taught us. Love the Lord your God with your whole heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. We are called, each one of us are called to love God fully and completely. Without rooting our lives in the love of God, we cannot know nor understand love. But then we must put that love into action. We do this, and must do it, by the love that we show our neighbor. Often, so often, we must try to remind ourselves that we must act so that we see Christ in every person whom we meet, particularly in the poorest of the poor. But at the same time, we must remember that it is our obligation, out of living out of the will of God, that we must act so that everyone we meet may always see the face of the Christ in us. And if they do not see the face and experience the hands and know the love of Christ through us, we really have done little for them. There's a story told that after World War II, a group of young Germans traveled to Great Britain to assist in the rebuilding of that country that had been devastated by German bombing. They were there to physically do the labor, to get their hands dirty and their backs aching in reparation for what they felt their country had done. They were working at one church building when they found the statue of the Christ. They placed it back on its pedestal and found it to be in perfect shape. Well, almost so. The hands were gone, broken off in the ruins of the bombing, a different thought. This would be Jesus with no hands. And so the marker they attached to the statue now reads as they placed it, "Now you must be the hands of Christ." This is what we are called to be to every person. The hands of Christ, the face of Christ, the heart of Christ, the love of Christ. That, my friends, is what Don Green has been to us and to so many others beyond this beautiful church. He has been to so many the hands of Christ, the face of Christ, the love of Christ. It seems like Don Green has been everywhere since 1992. When he joined his bishop's staff in Southwestern Pennsylvania Synod of the Lutheran Church in America as assistant to then Bishop Donald McCoy. I think it can be rightly said without much challenge that Don Green has been at just about every major religious event in Greater Pittsburgh during the last 20 years. The cheerful, graceful presence of this Lutheran pastor, our dear brother and friend, has been a driving force in ecumenical and interreligious dialogue, cooperative efforts to better our community, and simply put, genuine friendship for so many years that it is impossible for us to imagine the word retirement connected to his name. On April 27th, I will be in Rome with a number of Pittsburghers to celebrate the canonizations of Pope John Paul II and Pope John XXIII. Most of you remember John Paul II very well. I know Don does. In 2004, he accompanied the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra to Rome for a performance before John Paul to honor the Pope's commitment to interfaith understanding and ecumenical reconciliation. But for some of you in church today, the name of John XXIII might be a little less well known. He died on June 3rd, 1963, just about the time I was finishing up the 8th grade. His papacy lasted less than 5 years, yet it was his vision of unity among all believers that inspired the Second Vatican Council. He changed the world by his call for renewal, dialogue, prayer, and openness to the world. He opened the windows of the Catholic Church. By his actions, he opened the windows of so many other congregations as well. Windows that had been tightly shut for centuries. And no wonder that the world loved him for all that he did. In 1958, Angelo Roncalli was elected Pope. And most people thought, being elected at the age of 77, that he would simply be a caretaker, to give the Catholic Church the collective breath after decades of war and Cold War. But this roly-poly man had something else in mind. This man with a much bigger heart knew exactly what God's Spirit was calling him to do and to be. I don't mean to embarrass Don Green, but I can't help recall John XXIII when I think of Don. It was that common sense of humor, so clearly a part of both of their lives. John XXIII was famously asked by a journalist, how many people work in the Vatican? And his answer was, about half of them. Anyone who has ever been in Don Green's presence for even more than a minute has caught his humor and his very genuine smile. Don is completely faithful in his Lutheran tradition, as John XXIII was to the Catholic faith. Yet both found at the same time a driving force and a desire for unity, that so much good could be accomplished in the world through good people being brought together. Faith has to be lived in love, lived in fellowship, lived in friendship across the spectrum of our traditions. Friendship. That was the message of John the 23rd to us, and that's the kind of stewardship Don Green has brought to Southwestern Pennsylvania for over 2 decades. In his own words, and I quote, "The ecumenical journey is all about establishing and nurturing relationships. I love to schmooze with other people. So the call to Christian associates has given me an opportunity to make connections with so many different folks, not just from the member churches, but with the interreligious, civic, nonprofit, and governmental communities as well. With those contacts, I believe the Spirit has helped me connect the dots and bring folk together for the cause of unity and the good of our communities." So spoke Don Green. Donald Green has been a gift to the people of Southwestern Pennsylvania in many different ways. Let's see. We could name so many of them. The litany of his accomplishments. His major projects included administering chaplaincy services at the Allegheny County Jail, overseeing the Christian Associates television network, being an expert on emergency preparedness and response, organizing the Southwestern Pennsylvania Volunteer Disaster Response Coalition that's recognized by FEMA. He currently chairs the Allegheny County FEMA Emergency Food and Shelter Board. He's a member of the National Council of Churches, Local and Regional Ecumenism Committee, and was the local planning chair for the 2011 National Workshop on Christian Unity, which took place in Pittsburgh. He's on the executive committee of the Religious Leadership Forum of Southwestern Pennsylvania and has had an important role in dialogues with representatives of the Jewish and Muslim communities. And we could go on and on and on. The titles don't mean all that much, but what does is the spirit that this pastor, this doctor, this friend, our Don, has brought to Southwestern Pennsylvania. He has had other countless other church and charitable posts, and he has done it so well with a smile and that infectious laughter that has brought people of diverse backgrounds together for the good of the whole community. Don Green has called his service at Christian Associates, and I quote, "a journey toward unity, founded upon relationships nurtured in a common commitment to the gospel." He says, "I believe that I've helped folk just be for the sake of trusting relationships without always feeling that we needed to do something. As the relationships have grown and been nurtured, then we have to be able to do some awesome things together. I've been blessed by this ministry." End of Don's quote. And so today we come together in this church recognizing how much we have been blessed by him, and how much Southwestern Pennsylvania has been blessed by him, and how imperative it is for us to ask God's blessings upon him. I know that I've been blessed to work with him for many years as a colleague and a friend. And I can tell you what you already know. He is a man of faith in action and a man of friendship to all. As I noted at the beginning of my reflections, this is the Lenten season. And all of us in the Christian tradition know that this is a time that calls for prayer, fasting, and charitable works. In the Lenten prayer, written by William Arthur Ward, we are reminded of a special way to fast during Lent. Fast from judging others. Feast on Christ dwelling in them. Fast from discontent. Feast on gratitude. Fast from anger. Feast on patience. Fast from unrelenting pressures. Feast on unceasing prayer. Fast from bitterness. Feast on forgiveness. Fast from self-concern. Feast on compassion for others. Fast from personal anxiety. Feast on eternal truth. Fast from discouragements. Feast on hope. Fast from thoughts that weaken. Feast on promises that inspire. Fast from problems that overwhelm. Feast on prayer that strengthens. Amen. When I think of Don Green, I think of, as I know, a man of God who has done that kind of fasting and feasting his whole life. Don has long fasted from self-concern and feasted on compassion to others, and has invited so many of us to join with him in that effort. His life has been a fast from discouragement and a feast of hope. When John the 23rd died in June of 1963, his will called for whatever he had to be distributed among his relatives. It is estimated that he left an estate at nearly $20. Don, I hope that the Lutheran Church will treat you better in your retirement. In the name of all of us who are gathered here today, all of us and Christian associates, and everyone in this congregation, together with them, I offer congratulations and appreciation from our communities to you for being such a good and a great neighbor. And on a personal note, I would simply say God's blessing on your retirement, you who are a friend and brother. Thank you for all that you have accomplished for all of our people. On his deathbed, John the 23rd is said to have spoken one word as his final wish. Unity, he said. Unity. Don, I know that this is a prayer that you have not only shared, but especially have lived. Let us feast then on promises that inspire and never forget that goal. And as we baby boomers would be tempted to say in relation to that, yeah.